shift over that way? Yeah, if everyone wants to shift to your right, whatever's easiest. All right. Well, thank you for attending the last session before we break out for libation and food today. So my name is Matt Nelson. I work for A.A.E Consulting and Executive Search. And prior to that, I was a pilot for Southwest Airlines on the Boeing 737. To my left here, we've got esteemed panel members. I want John to start off with what you do, John, at your airport, briefly, and then we'll move from left to right.
John Stout, Airport Manager at Sonoma County Airport, just north of San Francisco, non-hub airport.
Paul Lehman, American Airlines. I'm basically the western half of the country's primary liaison with airport airside as well as air traffic control facilities on the operational part of the airline.
Jeff Hartz with Mead and Hunt, based in Dallas, but I do air service consulting stretching from California out to New York.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, well, when I was learning to fly, my mentors to my left here taught me some very important things. In fact, Paul told me three things that are most important to a pilot is that, least important is the fuel you've used, the runway behind you, and the altitude above you. I thought that was pretty sage advice. Then John Stout said, your recurring comments are, if it flew in, it'll fly out. Right? Okay. Work with me here. And then Jeff said, if you pull back on the stick, the barn gets smaller. And then you said if you push forward, the cows get larger. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so we're going to start with the first slide presentation. I think, did Paul want to start? Or Jeff, you want to start with this? Okay, all right, here we go.
I want to be done so I can walk next door and watch the next presentation. Apparently everyone else is there. I don't know where the heck everyone is. But I'm Jeff Hartz. I'm with Mead and Hunt. I do air service consulting. And do we have a clicker? Oh, there it is. And so I do a lot of these presentations through the year, and almost always it is, airline industry update and talking about what's going on in the industry or how you get air service. And it was actually kind of a cool conversation that we're able to do something a little bit different here and going to talk about scheduling. So my background, I spent 8 years in the airlines in various management roles. All of them, though, were scheduling. So there's periods of time I did pricing, revenue management, marketing, and sales. But the one constant in all 8 years and the 6 airlines was scheduling. And so it is a passion of mine. It's something I don't get to talk about very often because, frankly, most people sit there and go, oh, dear God, it's scheduling. How exciting could it be? But there's a lot of things that go into that. And so we're going to talk about that side of the equation. So inside of network planning, they're the guys that make all the decisions for where and how the airline is going to fly. They have a scheduling department, and they work hand in hand with network planning. They work hand in hand a lot of times with even revenue management, especially sales and stuff like that. But they are usually a very insulated group that don't talk to the outside folks very often. They never come to conferences. They never, do headquarters meetings with airports. Every now and then they may show up in one, but they really don't. They tend to be very they're not very extroverted in that regard. So scheduling is a culmination of all the processes. So when airline planning gets finally figured out, and hey, we're going to fly here, and we want to fly 6 times a day to XYZ market, schedulers are the ones that finally take that and put it to culmination, get that out there to be able to sell so you can actually make some money on the route. And so one of the things with scheduling that, again, most people know, but it is, again, one of those things that's very different in it, there's 2 different schedules, quote unquote. One is a selling schedule. That is a generic schedule that essentially goes out to infinity on whichever airline's time frame. So most airlines sell about 330 days out, but you have Southwest that goes, about 180 to 210 days. JetBlue's right around there. Frontier's right around there as well. So that's a selling schedule. There's a final schedule that gets finalized. That actually is what's going to actually fly. That finalizes about 90 days to 120 days out. And so when you book a ticket, 6 months out for next summer's or next winter's vacation, and you get, a notification a month from now and then 3 months from now saying it changed, that's why, because they're tweaking the schedules and that hasn't been finalized. Really, at the 90-day mark, everything's solidified. It starts going out for bid to all the crews, all the stations, airports all get the schedule, and then it's finalized there. Schedules are done in different seasons. We refer to it as some airlines are a little bit different. Again, Southwest tends to put them out, again, in seasons, but they then essentially solidify them, though, out through the end of the schedule period. American Airlines went through a bunch of different ones. The old days used to be schedule seasons. Then it went to monthly and even bi-monthly, or sorry, twice a month schedule changes, and now it went back to seasons. They try not to change it too often because you have a lot of turmoil. When you take, and you're selling tens of thousands of seats out in the future, and you change the schedule, it makes a lot of effort, A, for your customers, but B, reservations, when you end up having the schedule change. And you're having to notify them of schedule changes, and they're calling in to change their flights because of that schedule change. So they try to avoid too much of that period, and again, limit that to seasons, again, 4 or 5 a year. Again, it's a multi-step process. Again, you're determining frequency, you're doing aircraft allocation, and then schedule time. So first piece of that, talking about the different scheduling groups, there's 2 different groups inside of scheduling. The future schedules group and the current schedules group. And it's not real hard probably to figure out what does what. The future one does the ones in the future. And again, it typically is about the 6 month, 5-6 months and beyond time frame. Yeah, I hate handheld microphones. Sorry, that's why I always use the lapel. And so I talk with my hands. So the 3 of you guys online at home, I apologize for that. So the future schedule group, again, they're really responsible for the strategy, the structure of the schedules. So when they're looking at we're going to redo and add banks for American Airlines back 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that was the future schedule group that comes with that structure. It creates the overall schedule and then hands it over to the current schedule group that actually goes in and finalizes it and fine-tunes it, gets it to the point that you can hand it to the crew planning folks so they can go out to bid to the pilots and flight attendants, that it's fully gated so that you can show up and fly that schedule without having any complications there. So in the scheduling process, the frequency allocation. So the first process when you're doing scheduling is trying to figure out, well, how many times you want to fly a given route. So you know you're going to fly to a city, but how many times? It is actually a fairly in-depth process of usually sitting around with 3, 4, 5, 10 different people around a table for what seems like hours, going through every single route. All right, do we want to do more than last year? Do we want to do less than last year? And talk about the next one, what size aircraft really comes to play in the frequency? Are we upgauging? Did we have 50-seat airplanes in a given route last year, and now it's 76-seat airplanes? Do we want to keep the same frequency? Do we actually want to go up that much in capacity, a 50% increase in capacity on that route, because we want to keep 3 round trips in that, or do we drop down to 2 round trips in that conversation? Again, route performance. How did it do last year? Was it a gangbuster route? Was it making a lot of money? Did it have high load factors, or was it a dog? And if it's a dog, okay, so what can you do? Is it a schedule problem? Is it something that we think we can fix? Or is it something that we just need to pull capacity out of? Do you need to have a smaller airplane, or do you need to, again, just pull a frequency out of that? Competition. Is there new competition on our route? I mean, right now, especially with ultra-class carriers growing as much as they are and adding a lot of service, you're getting a lot of competition even in the small hub and non-hub routes that didn't used to exist. Or the old, American United slugfest that's going on in Chicago that is continuing to add more and more competition on routes that didn't have them historically over the last 10, 15 years there. Again, market demand forecast if it's a new route. I mean, so what can you do on that new route? And I'm apparently getting yelled at. All right, can people hear me? Does this work? Hello? Maybe? Maybe not. Sorry, you 6 of you that are in here. Testing? All right, good. So again, you're looking at the market demand for new routes. We talked about the aircraft side. So aircraft allocation is another real big one. Again, what are you going to fly on it? And there's a lot of things, and I've done a bunch of really bad mistakes on some of these. Biggest one is performance of the aircraft. Just because you think the aircraft can actually fly the route, you probably want to make sure it can fly the route. It turns out, when this is, again, going back a bit of a ways, but as with American Airlines, and we were starting LA to Reno. And United was flying LA Reno, also with a 50-seat jet. And I kind of forgot Reno's at some elevation, and it turns out the CRJ200 is a little bit better than the ARJ145 at elevation. And about a week and a half before we started, it was a very large problem when operational analysis folks came in and said, what the heck are you guys doing? we can't actually fly Reno to LA with this airplane without massive payload restrictions. And so that comes into play quite a bit, especially on the regional side, is the operational performance of that aircraft. Can it physically fly it? On the runway length, because runways vary. I mean, if you're Yuma with a 14,000-foot runway, yeah, you have no problems. But if you're a Oxnard with a 5,700 or 5,900-foot runway, that's a much bigger problem. You can't fly the same aircraft on there. Layout of the aircraft. This goes into, is there premium demand? Is there a demand for first class? How much demand is that? This gets in, especially international, wide body. Are you wanting to put, a product that's got first class for American and premium economy and business class, or you just want the business class and premium economy and economy cabins on that? So that really comes down into that play as well. And then at the end of the day, too, availability at the aircraft and crew at that base. So if you're flying to LA and you really want to fly a 50-seat RJ on it, it's a problem for American because they don't fly 50-seat RJs into LA. So at that point, you ain't going to get that service. Or you're not going to be able to operate that route with that aircraft. It's got to have some give and take there. So schedule time. So once you figured out how much you're going to fly, what aircraft you're going to fly, then you get to throw it all into a giant pool. So typically the airlines will take the previous schedule and then they'll massage it for next year or for the next season and go that way, so making tweaks. Every now and then you get to have a fun experiment with tossing it all up in the air and starting from scratch. I got to do that a few times at American, and it's a lot of fun. Maybe not for everyone, but to start over and say, hey, I've got 300 airplanes that I can schedule. I can do whatever the heck I want with and change schedules on it. Let's start over from scratch as far as the timings of it, the frequencies in some regard, the aircraft allocations, to try to see what we can do in that. And so when you're doing it, typically when you're doing it that way, you're doing it from the good to the bad. So you start with your best routes or your most important routes or the ones that have the most constraints. So if it's a slot-controlled airport, you start with those first, and then you work your way backwards. And so if you are a high-performing route, you're going to get one heck of a good schedule. If you're just kind of puddling along and it's an average route, it's okay. And then if you're losing a lot of money, the problem is you end up having the self-fulfilling prophecy because you don't reward them with a great schedule if they're already losing money, which then makes the route a little bit worse. So again, it kind of is that give and take because you're trying to solve for a system solution, not just in each individual route. And when you start talking the size of American, Delta, United, with literally hundreds and hundreds of routes and thousands of flights, things have to give and take on that. So gating at the hub is another one, and at the spoke. But usually the hub is the biggest problem because you obviously squeeze things into as big of a solution as possible. But then you also then go back and figure out, well, how do I make this work at the hub or the spoke? And if it's a single route, it's relatively easy. If you have 2, 3, 4, 5 hubs worth of flights, it gets a lot more complicated because at that point, you can't have all your flights leave at 6 a.m. when you've got 5 different hubs because you don't have 5 gates at a Santa Rosa. You end up having to do, okay, the best one I want to go out is at 6, then I'm going to have to do it 5, which no one in the right mind wants to take at 5 a.m., but you have to compromise on that. And then it's a 7, and then it's 8. And so you end up having a less than desirable solution in the process, but you're making it, again, based off of what's the most highest priority at that spoke down to the least priority at that spoke. Maintenance and crew requirements get built in, because one thing that most people don't realize, typically, especially for regionals, the aircraft has to sit in a maintenance base every 3 days. So 1/3 of the airplanes that Americans flying, American Eagles, 300 and some odd airplanes that are flying around out there, 1/3 of them are sitting in a maintenance base every single night, which means, I would love to have 2 or 3 overnights at my city because I can probably support it. But unless you're a maintenance base, that becomes very challenging because you end up then having a lot of cities that don't end up having an overnight. And at the end of the day, everyone needs or wants an overnight in their market. So that's a big one there. Crew requirements. Is it a legal overnight? Are you doing it just on the normal rest, or are you doing it on stage crew? Do you have, if it's only one round trip, is it an overnight? Then you have to have that legal longer overnight versus if you have 2 or 3 round trips in the market, you can have the crew that comes in midday take out that 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. departure. So that really comes into play on the scheduling side of it as well. And then competitor schedules. If it's a head-to-head competitive race? Oh, dear God, I hope that's not me. Apparently it's lightning outside, so we'll go with that. Makes more sense. But so the competitors are doing. So if it's a head-to-head route and you're flying American versus United, you want to have a competitive schedule against them. So if United's flying, at 6, 10, 2, and 5, you probably want to be somewhat in the same general area of that. You don't want to have, a big gap in your schedule that United's sitting right there in the middle, that people that need to fly there will just arbitrarily fly United because that's the time that works best for them. So there's a lot of competitive schedule in there as well in that. So looking at new routes, and again, typically when you have it, you could kind of build the schedule in with the new routes. Every now and then, though, you'll be building a schedule and you go, hey, I all of a sudden have some time here. I can fly something else. So what else is best on our list to do? And that's when you start getting markets shoehorned in. You may get a less than desirable schedule for a season or two until the airline gets around to reworking the entire schedule, system schedule that can get the more ideal schedule, because they may have a block, and using an example down here, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon that they've got an airplane that goes to bed in the hub that they can fly it somewhere. So it may not be ideal to have a 4 o'clock flight, one round trip to a given city, but it's better than nothing. And so you'll put it in there, hope that you can then, 6 months from now or 3 months from now, get it into a proper schedule. Keep shifting it forward into that, 11 o'clock or noon departure, or even an overnight ultimately. So some of the things that scheduling isn't, so one of the things, again, I talked about at the beginning, schedulers rarely come out and communicate with the public. They talk a little bit more than revenue management. They never go out anywhere, and pricing folks, but schedulers rarely do. They are typically, back room. They'll have coordination with network planning folks, with the hub managers, talking to them about what's needed, what the airports are communicating back to them, but you never have really a direct interaction with them on, hey, this is what I'm seeing. The other thing that's real important is these schedulers, and again, depends, you may have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, but you still have, even if you have 5 people working on 1,000, 1,500 different aircraft trying to schedule this airline. And so they don't have the ability to look at every single market pair and make sure that every single one is absolutely perfect, every single schedule. So again, as they start at the most important ones and they work their way down, things get missed, or more importantly, they get compromised. And that's where it's important from a community standpoint to always be looking at that, looking at the schedules and seeing, hey, you know what, this isn't good for us operationally. And John will talk about that as having, American or United or Delta are building their schedule in a vacuum. They don't care what United or Delta are doing at that spoke city because they're trying to get their best schedule. So you may unduly create a problem that has everybody flying at noon that doesn't quite work for the airport infrastructure. And that's something that needs to be communicated back to the airline. Or, again, a marketing perspective, because, again, it doesn't work for them as far as, we need a 6 a.m. departure, or we don't do 6 a.m. departures. Our community does not get up at 6 a.m. We would much rather be at 8 or 7 a.m. because of the fact that the way our community works. Or curfews, which I've scheduled things that have gone up to the curfew or past, because you just aren't quite aware of that. Because, again, you're looking at this giant system and you're trying to deal with 300, 350 cities, it's easy to forget one of those things if it's not a slot controlled in that regard. So again, all this goes into what's going on in the industry, on what this happens. Again, pilot availability is a massive problem of this, of the upgauging of, so as you have less 50-seater, so you have less pilots in the regional world, as an airline, as American, United, Delta, the same amount of pilots are able to fly a 76-seat airplane as a 50-seat airplane. And so if you can fly around 76 seats, you'd much rather do that than 50. And that's led a lot to recently, again, the increase in gauge and the retirements of a lot of the 50-seaters out there, because there is an ability to carry, A, cheaper the aircraft, or sorry, the seats, but B, more importantly, you're carrying more for the same very finite pilot, because again, there's not as many pilots as everyone would want. Densification of aircraft, larger aircraft, that's affected a lot of things. So again, we don't have as many 50-seaters, so we have more 76-seaters. We also don't have as many smaller mainline airplanes. There aren't as many 125-seat mainline airplanes flying around. There's a lot more 166, 196-seat mainline airplanes flying around than the smaller ones. That affects the schedules and how it fits in and how many frequencies you have and what you can actually fly. Smaller aircraft, they're aging. That means you have to touch them longer at maintenance base. You have to have a longer overnight. The heavy maintenance checks take a lot longer as those airplanes age, so all of that affects how much you can schedule. So you may have 300 physical units, but every year as those airplanes age, you're going to be able to schedule one less or two less aircraft as they spend much more time sitting out here at the Tucson Bombardier facility. Instead of 20 days, they may be there for 29 days because they get that much harder to maintain and more requirements there. And then the ultra low-cost carrier impacts, again, some of them have been red-eyes. Some of the airlines have started doing more middle-of-the-night flying from the West Coast. United added Eugene and Redmond to the to Chicago. That really probably would never have happened if Frontier didn't start doing more of that sized markets on red-eyes, or Spirit, because they're trying to fly their aircraft that much more. So the airlines are trying to squeeze more utilization out of their aircraft. So I appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. All right, up next we have Paul with American Airlines. He's going to walk around like Mike Lapeer.
How about this? Is fun. All right. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I'm going to kind of follow up what Jeffrey was talking about and add some of the airline's direct our own direct impacts on this as well too. So first of all, you've got to remember there's that Department of Transportation, Department of Commerce requirement that we cannot share schedules, we cannot share future intentions with our competitors. And the reason I bring that up is because sometimes it would actually be a benefit, and I'm going to use San Francisco as a good example. Coming up this September for 20 days, San Francisco, if any of you know that airport, 2 of the 4 runways are going to be closed for that entire time. You've just reduced the capacity of that airport by 50%. Well, the FAA, while they have decided not to slot the control of that airport just for those 20 days, has also asked the airlines to kind of work together to reduce their schedules, to reduce the demand on an airport that's lost 50% of their capacity. And of course, the first thing we say is we can't do that. It's against the law. So just keep some of those things in mind when it comes to scheduling, future scheduling, et cetera. But I would say know your passenger at your airport. I was talking to the airport director at Grand Canyon Airport yesterday, and he's figured out that most of the people who probably want to come to that airport are from Asia. That seems to be where the demand is to come see Lake Powell, Grand Canyon. And so the last place he would want to try to set up a connection is through Phoenix. Phoenix does not have any connections directly to Asia. So he's better off looking at Los Angeles or San Francisco or maybe Las Vegas. And his competition is not another airline or another airport. His competition are the buses that when they come in from Asia and they bus up to Vegas and then they bus them out to Grand Canyon to the Grand Canyon, he needs to provide a way that they can offset that competition and say, fly to my airport instead of taking a bus up Interstate 15 from Los Angeles. And show how that can be to the airlines. I'm saying how this can be something attractive that you can take advantage of. Yes, there's been a lot of cases where the network planning and the scheduling when it comes to the type of aircraft they want to use on a route doesn't always work. Another good example of that is when I was at TWA, we flew Colorado Springs to St. Louis. We were flying it with an MD-80, and MD-80 does not have a lot of performance, doesn't have a particularly good wing, and because of the elevation of that airport, we were often required to, especially if the temperature got up above maybe 75 degrees, we had to take passenger, we had to restrict the number of seats we could sell on that airplane. So, and plus that airplane was too big for that market. Really, it was hard to sell all the seats on that airplane anyway, 140, 150 seat airplane on that particular market because Colorado Springs just wasn't that big, and if somebody wanted to fly international, they were going to go up to Denver anyway. So when TWA brought in the 717, now network planning says that's the perfect airplane for this market. And it's a brand new airplane with bigger engines, it's going to go faster, it's going to be able to take care of the altitude. The problem was network planning didn't realize that it's still the same wing. In fact, it's a DC-9 wing. It wasn't even an MD-80 wing. And so even after they put that airplane on that market, we realized right away, unless we were cutting off 50% of the passengers, we would have to do a fuel stop in Wichita on the way to St. Louis. We just couldn't carry that much fuel, or we would either have to take half the passengers off, one or the other. And you'd hate to take off revenue, but you obviously have a minimum fuel requirement that you have to have, or you do an intermediate fuel stop. And the first thing network planning said to me was, well, wait a minute, that airplane has much bigger engines. They should be able to get off that runway. And I said, but it's still the same wing. That's where you're generating the lift. All those bigger engines mean is that we're just going to be going faster when we go off the end of the runway. So those are all things, and my point being is that you have to include all the stakeholders in not only your company but at the airport. You've got to know who the passengers that are going to be flying there. So if you're Sacramento and 80% of your passengers are not going international, then maybe it's better to think about connecting through Dallas, Phoenix, and again, I use the American example, but you get the point. Whereas if you think most of your passengers are going to be going to Asia, you should be looking at Sacramento again to San Francisco, maybe Los Angeles, possibly Seattle, depending on where you think they want to go. Because those are where the connections are going to be, and that's where the airlines are going to say, yes, we can connect the passengers and bring in that business. So, you look at the airport. In the case of American Airlines, Phoenix has now become more of a intermountain connection type of your Sacramento to El Paso passenger. Whereas if your people want to go to the East Coast, we're not going to send them through Phoenix. We'd send them through Chicago or Dallas. Okay, so look at, where they want to go and provide that information to the airline so that they can find out the best route for it. And we've talked a little bit at some of the complications, but going back to bringing in the whole team, network planning is getting better at engaging people like me on the operational side to say, do we have a performance issue? LaHooey, we would like to put the A321neo in there. That next engine option, the NX, I think is they're going to call the official title. That's a 321. If anybody knows anything about an Airbus 321, it's a performance dog. Just does not climb well, does not do well out of short runways. But with these new engines and some of the other enhancements, maybe that airplane will work. It's a lot less costly to operate that airplane compared to an older 757. So, that's a possibility that might work depending on if you get all the people involved to say, what will we do and what other problems may there be. And so another good example, and I'm sorry, not all of you are from big airports, but I like to use big airport examples. Seattle wants to add, 29 gates? Something like that up there at Seattle. They really want to grow, and there's a good reason why. That city is one of the fastest growing cities in the country. They're trying to meet the demand of the future, and I don't blame them for that. Okay, now they're already landlocked. They don't have the ability to expand out into more areas, but they have a plan to kind of add all these gates moving up from the north side of the terminal there. And they think they've got it all worked out where they can fit in all these airplanes, and that's great. Well, how many flights a day does 29 gates give you? I don't know, multiply it by 6 maybe. So you're talking about another 130, 140 flights a day maybe. Well, has anybody considered, can the airspace handle that amount of activity? And in the case of Seattle, maybe not. All you're doing is, yes, it's great revenue. Those gates are going to bring you more money, but are we going to see massive delays where now everybody pushes off? And by the way, somebody asked me once, well, why did American leave their, they used to spread their banks out. We didn't peak them. Now we peak them since U.S. Airways and American merged. And somebody said, well, why not go back to the more flat structure where we didn't peak our banks at our major hubs? Well, the reason is it doesn't make money. That's why American went bankrupt. Now that we're back peaking our hubs and we have all these options for our customers, then while it may pose bigger problems and challenges for maintaining a reliable operation, it's also making money, and then we can throw money at some of the problems with technology and other ways to solve the operational problems. But going back to Seattle, unless they also invest in ways to make the airspace more efficient, and they've got a big noise problem up there, and I'm not even going to get into the political side of noise. It's for the airlines, we're going to lose that battle every time. But you have to look at that side of it as well, too, for a bigger airport. If you expand too fast on the ground, what's going to happen with the airspace congestion. You just can't pump those airplanes off the ground. ATC has their limits as to how many aircraft they can have in a certain sector. And you just can't flush that airport quick enough if you've got a bunch of airplanes coming out all at the same time, and now you've just added another 15 or 20 or maybe 30 flights because of all the gates you're adding. And you don't want to ruin the customer's experience by sitting out there for an hour and 45 minutes as almost a guarantee every time, even in good weather. Then they're going to say, well, gee, maybe next time I'll fly to Everett, or maybe I'll fly to Portland and take the train. You don't want to give them that option or to even think that that's something that they may consider. So those are all things you have to bring in. That's why you want to bring in your operations people. You want to bring your pilot management in there. You want to bring in your corporate real estate, which they normally do, and our properties and facilities people to make sure that everybody understands all the issues. And I'll use one more example, Salt Lake City, where they're building a brand new terminal there. It's going to be a beautiful terminal. And our corporate real estate folks said, hey, we want the gates here because the American gates, because they're so close to, when they first come in and they get through TSA, boom, there's a gate. They don't have to walk all the way down, through 3 or 4 moving sidewalks to get to the very end. We don't want that. That's not a good customer experience. Well, but they're deep in the alley. And now they're in the most congested part of what that airport's going to be. You're going to have all kinds of airplanes trying to push out in that alley at the same time. And how do you know if you're going to be first or 15th? And now you're sitting on the gate, and it's really important to us that we get that flight out on time. And especially the first flight of the day, because if it's not out on time, it's probably never going to catch up the way the weather and the airspace system is now. So maybe sometimes it's better to consider a gate that's on the other side. It may be a little bit further walk for your customers. It could be, but maybe find that happy medium. And on that side, there's no congestion, and they can get right off the gate, get to the end of the runway, and away they go. And so you have to make sure that all of the different parties are included in the considerations for what you're doing at your airport, both land side, air side, et cetera. Okay, that's, unless you have some questions for me right now based on what I was talking about, I'll pass on to the, excellent. John, it's all yours.
Good afternoon. I guess I'm the one that's going to hold you up to the drink. But I'm going to do the case perspective on what the fleet mix does to an airport. Not trying to say that I would want to change this, but we've had a lot of changes in Santa Rosa over the last 3 years. And it does have a lot of impacts that you don't necessarily always think about. But continuing what you've been saying about gate space, ramp space, and all of that, we're probably a great example of squeezing that stress ball and seeing where it pops out. So in 2016, we had one airline with one aircraft type, 76-seat Q400. It worked great on the ramp. Didn't have to argue over who's in whose spot. Didn't have to fight over air stairs. We don't have jet bridges, so it's all about the stairs. 17, we were at 2 airlines, 2 aircraft types. MD-80, so going from a 76-seat to 168 seats was a big jump for us. 2018, 4 airlines, 5 aircraft types, and then 2019, we still have the same 4 airlines, but they've changed their fleet. So now we have 7 aircraft types operating in and out of our airport. What that did in terms of our passenger numbers, from 2015 through 2018, we were the 6th fastest growing airport in the United States with about a 60% increase in passenger volume. It's a good thing, don't get me wrong, wouldn't give it up. But our first big issue was our ramp. The picture in the upper left is Google Map, or Google Earth, showing we had 2 aircraft parking spots. They were pretty much designed for the Q400. Luckily, that has a bigger wing, so it did give us some flexibility. But then when we started getting the MD-80, we started having wingtip issues, and you can see it's asphalt. That asphalt was built in the 1960s, so we started seeing some other issues with unintended consequences. You add the frequency on it, you start seeing rutting and other issues and failure rates. I had notes on my thing I forgot about. So we were lucky to be able to self-perform an apron reconstruction, so we were able to build a concrete apron for 2 aircraft parking spots. We're now getting reimbursed through the FAA through our entitlements, so that will be taken care of. But we also designed it so we can handle 4 spots. The part that we had the struggle with is because we don't have exclusive gates, because we don't have a gate. We had a hold room that was 2,400 square feet. Everybody's in it. You go through one door. We did expand to a temporary structure, a sprung structure. It's still one gate, 4 doors. So each spot could be used by all carriers. So trying to fit, so there was flexibility through the day from the MD-80 737 to a CRJ 200, and making sure we had all the clearances, safety zones. And one thing I didn't realize, how much stuff each airline brings to service that aircraft. I don't know why they need 6 carts for a CRJ 200, but they showed up. I think they have a list of here's what you're getting and where can we put it. But they all want it on their apron. So that was a big challenge for us and where to put it all. We also were starting to push up on aircraft category, changing from C3 to potentially a D3 airfield environment, and watching the number of ops per year to make sure we're not going into another ARF category. So going to the airspace issues, but what are we having on the ground? Changing to a D3 category, our airfield doesn't have the space for that. And then our runway is rated for the 737 type aircraft, but it was rehabbed in 2001, but we're starting to see some life issues on it because of frequency. We never thought we would be having that frequent of that heavy aircraft. And we've also noticed with the increase in our runway length that we did in 2014, our air attack base is now bringing in larger tankers. We're seeing DC-9 type aircraft coming in, C-130s with retardant. The terminal was the real fun one. Our terminal was about 15,000 square feet in 2016. We are very efficient, so we like to claim that. But we only had 2 ticket podiums, 4 agent positions. We had a single gate with a door and 1 podium until the second carrier. We just rolled in basically a lectern to make it work. That was our biggest push getting ready for this. Our TSA area was only a 450 square foot bag makeup on the back side of the terminal with 1 CT-80 machine. The upper portion of the picture. And then because our terminal is small, we have a single TSA checkpoint, single lane, and it's a non-standard, non-conforming lane. So we only have about 75% of the space we should have for a regular lane. Which leads to, we don't get a whole lot of say in when they schedule. Going back to the 2 conversations earlier, the plane's available, it fits with our banks, we want it to time with our banks. And so this summer, we're struggling with a block of 2 hours with everything from a CRJ 200 up to a 737-800, which maxes us out at about 608 passengers during that period. Our line can handle 165 passengers per hour. So last week, we had passengers out through the front door of our terminal, down the sidewalk. And then we also had TSA have their x-ray go down at the checkpoint for a full day. We are very popular. We would like to have a little bit more say in that schedule, but we want the airplanes. One savior for us is we do have a high percentage of pre-check. It's about 55% of our passengers. So they are at times able to get more than that 165 passenger throughput, but it's still very tight and congested on those days or during that time window. To accommodate all that growth, what we did is we built a modular trailer, double wide. It is now our ticketing area for United and American. They have their own counter, put in a bag belt system that goes from the back to that building to our oversized bag screen room. It is working, but we do have problems with small airport. People go to the main terminal, Where's American and United? Oh, you got to leave the building, go to the next building. Signage is interesting. No matter what you sign, most of the people don't read it. We're slowly getting there. And then in June, we added a 4,800 square foot sprung structure. That has been working out very well. We do have 4 podiums, 1 for each airline. But with the 608 passengers, even that is full. It has seating for 150. So we are standing room about every day. We are getting into a new terminal expansion project. We're going to be doing that construction manager at risk. We're through schematic. We're going to be adding a 30,000 square foot addition to the hangar. That'll give us a second check lane, full standard setup, and full pre-check. Unfortunately, that's going to be 24 to 36 months from now before that will come online, and then we'll be moving American United into the main terminal, doing a new ticketing hall, getting us up to 8 agent positions in the terminal for check-in, and then we'll add another 4 gate positions, and the main terminal area will add seating for about 350. And we are going to keep and incorporate the tent, so we'll have both facilities for our operations going forward. And that's kind of a quick and dirty case study for us.
Excellent. Well, the good news is there was a scheduling mistake, and we're going to be ending 15 minutes earlier today, so apologize about that. So with that said, we have about 8 minutes left for questions. A lot of good information here. I was going to start off with some questions of my own, but are there any questions from the group here? Don't be shy. Rosemary.
I always have a question. PIO for San Jose curfew. Let's see. Jeffrey, so you're talking about airline schedulers and blah, 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 and all perfect world, but tell us what was happening at Southwest when all of a sudden they realized they couldn't operate the MAX, and as things are moving forward, and what's it looking like? What's it been looking like in Southwest scheduling center over the past few weeks?
Well, all airlines that have, perfectly honest, every airline runs into something like this at some point. Luckily, American and Southwest weren't a massive exposure. Both of them had, American's what, 24-ish? I think Southwest was in the 30-ish range. So it's a big number, but it's in a, you'll call it the gray area, that you can shove some things around and try to fix it. But yeah, I mean, you saw a Southwest announcement for Newark service that they've canceled. They've partly blamed it on this. They've partly blamed it on operational performance there. But it is absolutely something that does come into play. The marginal routes that you don't necessarily want to cut, you end up having to go in and start cutting. American made a lot of changes to JFK because of the MAX issues, things that they not necessarily wanted to do, but it's certainly the ones that probably fall on that margin line, and you start doing that. So there's a lot of scrambling. And there's certainly airlines that run into this with, again, we're talking about heavy maintenance checks. Regional jets, this has been essentially my forte over the last 16 years, and those that for 16 years, as they age, have essentially bit every airline at least once with the next C-check on how much longer it takes. And so they first started at about 12 or 13 days. They're now upwards of 30 to 35 days that they take to come through there. And each additional one, as they age, you end up taking another 5 or 6 days longer than you even forecasted it to. Which, when you've got, say, in the case of SkyWest or some of the American subsidiaries, if you've got 200 airplanes that every single one of them are taking an extra 10 or 15 days to come out, you may lose 5, 10, 15 airplanes from the schedule that then the partners, or if you're American that's doing the scheduling of their wholly owns, that you have to now scramble to try to exactly do that. You come back through and start cutting from the margins, pulling frequency number 8 or 9 or 10 that you really wanted there. It made money, but at the end of the day, it's better than canceling routes. And that's, sadly, a fairly common occurrence in the airlines, and it's something that they're used to. I mean, it's usually the fire of the month or the fire drill of the day, yeah. Luckily, you usually don't lose a fleet for a day, but you certainly, once a month or two, I mean, you'll have something come up like this that you lost 1, 2, 3, 5 airplanes to, for some maintenance reason or crew reason that you've got to then scramble to fix. And it keeps you on the toes. It truly is fun in that regard. It is not the same thing over and over and over again.
Hi, thanks. This stuff is actually very fascinating to me, so thank you. My question is more in the future, in the planning side of things, you know, talking about autonomous vehicles in the future, like cars and whatnot. And if, you know, the 4 to 6 hour autonomous car drive, you know, somebody's more willing to take, you know, how is that going to affect, you know, scheduling and how you service, you know, smaller routes like hour routes or hour and a half? You know, is that, have you guys thought about that, and what are some of the ideas behind that? Maybe no hubbing or whatever. So,
Well, the first thing is we're going to have to get, and we have this problem with just drones already, is we're going to have to get a more regulatory and safer environment for this type of operation. We just can't have everybody who drives a car all of a sudden flip a button and then fly for 200 miles with that flying car, because now how are we going to keep that space between those two places safe? And that's where the federal government has come in with air traffic control, et cetera. That's the first thing that has to be solved. How are we going to allow all this independent freedom for anybody who can get in an autonomous vehicle and go to wherever they want to go and not crash into the person next to them and create problems? And that's where we're at this point, is how are we going to move in a regulatory way towards this. Eventually we'll be there to that type of environment. I think, again, the technology is already there, but we don't have the infrastructure and the regulatory means of managing that. You know, you also have companies right here in Tucson that want to shoot a rocket and a balloon up to 75,000 feet, and here it goes up, comes down right through the middle of a ton of airways, and all these airplanes are going back and forth, and here comes this semi-controlled autonomous device floating back down that is a commercial enterprise, and they have their rights to be there as well too, but we really haven't figured out who gets the what rights at what point and how we separate them all. And until we get to that point, we're not going to move forward to the next step. That's about the best I can tell you at this point.
The only thing I'd add real quick on that is airline planners, although they do have some long-term, some, you know, real future strategic scheduling groups that go thinking about 2-3 years in the future, they really don't get into that far in the future. They're really so concerned with trying to figure out how the heck to keep the schedule afloat and running in a sort of operationally reliable manner. I mean, let's face it, airlines are ecstatic when they fail 25% of the time. I mean, 25% of the time you're delayed, they're ecstatic. I mean, 75% on time is phenomenal for airlines. So they're really worried about that at this point. At some point, it's going to come up. And so as the autonomous, especially as Tesla starts getting further and further down that path, absolutely. And it's going to have to, it will impact small markets, probably more so than anybody, because it will be easier for them to get to a bigger airport to fly out. But luckily, we're still, 4, 5, 10 years down the road from that, and the airlines at this point, at least from my experience, are really looking at that 2 to 3 year window and are really trying to concentrate on that period. Hopefully someone's looking at it, but.
Thank you.
From a smaller airport perspective, I think due to our geography, we're probably not going to be real impacted with them at this point. Other than our United shortest flight in their network option, Santa Rosa to San Francisco, the autonomous vehicles really won't have much of an impact for us. Our congestion to the Bay Area is going to make us still a viable option, and all of our other markets that we have air service to, 4 to 6 hours won't get you there. It'll get you into the Bay Area and past it, but that's about it. We'll see some impact on the land side for our visitors and how that'll deal with our rental cars, but until the travelers are ready to get into that car and put themselves under the control of an autonomous vehicle, it's really not going to be, my perspective is that's still a long ways off.
Okay, I have one question here. I'm going to pick on Paul here. The conversation you had with the airport manager, at the Grand Canyon Airport.
Right.
Why not address, could you address at-risk flying? It seems to me like there's demand for the Asian market to fly in a CRJ 200 or a Q400. Why not have at-risk flying?
Well, I'm sorry, say that last part again.
At risk.
Oh,
at risk
I'm
flying.
sorry, I thought you said Atlas. And I
Yeah,
said, well,
Atlas,
they're
not
kinda
Atlas
big.
Cargo. No, at risk.
First of all, leisure travel is not your big revenue generator. The leisure travel is not going to want to spend a lot of money just getting to wherever their destination is. The exception might be overseas to Europe. But at the same point, to make a route profitable, you want to have some guaranteed a little bit more of your last minute customer who, your business traveler if you can. The risk for them is the fact that they won't have anybody like that on their flights. Chances are it's going to be all leisure travelers. So you have to have a way, a good, strong network to bring in leisure travelers from a lot of areas. Is Asia enough? That's what our network planning people are going to look at. Yeah, you may get 35 people a day, but a 50-seat airplane, 35 people, what are you going to do with that difference? Are you going to sell that remaining 15 seats at a big discount? Maybe to generate a little bit more revenue? I don't know. At American Airlines, 89% of the passengers who fly us in a year fly us once, that whole year. The other 11% is your frequent flyers, your more regular customers, and of those 11%, 1% is your premium passengers who are your big, our executive platinum concierge key. So when it comes to volume, you don't have those guaranteed high revenue types of passengers going to a place like Grand Canyon. So you've got to bring in the passengers from a large area to fill that airplane to make it profitable. And Essential Air Service sometimes can help with that. I told them, look at your community. Do the hotels feel that there's a value of bringing in these passengers? Maybe the community, the government, the city government, whoever, the hotels, any other tourists that would benefit from that, be willing to pitch in to kind of ensure some guaranteed revenue. Maybe not a profit, but at least offset some of that. American Airlines flies around. This is a much bigger example, but it demonstrates what you're saying. American Airlines flies a round trip every day between Raleigh-Durham and London Heathrow. Raleigh-Durham is not a connecting hub for American Airlines. The reason we operate that flight is because GlaxoSmithKline has their corporate headquarters in London or in England, and they have all of their biotech in the Raleigh-Durham Research Triangle area, and they literally guarantee 50 seats every day on that airplane. So even if they don't fill all those 50 seats with their corporate people, that's pretty much going to make up any difference that we get with just other passengers filling up that airplane. And it turns out we've been doing that for years, and it's been a profitable flight for us. I know Delta has similar things in other cities as well, too.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we'll leave it at that. Let's give our panel a big round of applause here. And we're at our stopping point here. We're 15 past the hour, and I believe the next event is 30 past. Yeah, más o menos. Okay, great. Okay, so we're finished here, and thank you very much for attending the last session, Pushing. Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Well done. Well done. Pleasure. Good job. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, guys. Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you. My pleasure. Yeah. It was good. No, absolutely.
So
The other session isn't until 4:30.
they ended at 4:50. We cut them
Oh.
early. So both sessions were supposed to go to until 16:30.
Oh, I thought they were only 4:15.
No, so there's a mix-up because they had the closing remarks set, which was true, but we had to end the session because they were supposed to go to 4:30. So it was like, how do you do closing remarks? Sessions are still going on.
Okay. All right.
Who am I giving the mic to for that? You got the closing remarks? Okay. That mic's hot right now.
So are we really waiting? Are we really waiting, or did they close?
Yes, good. Check it back.
All right. Look how cute that is. That's so cute. I was wondering what that was. Like, whose phone? That's what my alarm sounds like.
TV, but where's the TV at? You want to let everyone know I need a new business card.
I just threw mine.
Yeah, I know. I got yours.
Hey, everybody, if you haven't put your business card into the bowl, you need to do that because this is a brand new drawing. Got some good gifts up here. Put your business card in.
Thank you very much for giving me and American Airlines the opportunity.
Oh my God, I'm so happy that
Very,
you
very
came. No, thank you
happy
so
to talk
much.
to this
I
crowd.
really appreciate,
Yeah.
especially with resorting nothing back to life.
Well, like I said, I probably would have stayed down here if it wasn't for the fact that I was gone all weekend at my high school reunion, and
Yeah.
it was starting to crunch things, and I'm just like a lot of people. I just don't have 2 days plus a weekend, and I left on Friday without getting so far behind. It's catastrophic. So I had to just get some other stuff done, and then that's why I went. But and your whole staff has been very helpful, very nice. Yeah, you guys did a great job of hosting. I've been to a lot of conferences, including in Europe, the Passenger Terminal Expo, and for the size of this conference, you guys did a great job. I mean, obviously we don't have 1,000 people here, but nice venue. The snacks were great. I'm sure all the other. Just looking at the agenda, it sounded like a well-organized conference. You bet. Well, my pleasure, and I look forward to talking and working with you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Like 30 seconds, we'll close the door.
Okay. It's a little bit before 4:30 though. It's still like only 4:25.
That room's empty over
Oh,
there.
okay,
It's just the
perfect.
vendors in there. So
Okay.
you can wait if you want to wait, or we can go.
No, I don't want to make people suffer. So I have to send you things. What will you do in the sponsorship announcement?
Sponsorship announcements are done.
Okay, what's this? Can I see that? Oh, that's from you. Okay. Yeah. When we get going. Okay. Okay, gotcha.
Tomorrow is at 10, and then the people that are going to the A.A.E
Tell
tour,
real quick.
people that are going to,
I'll do it real quick for you. Or you want to do it after? Okay.
Okay, you guys ready? Are we ready? This is the moment you've been waiting for. Hello? Are you awake out there? Wow, you guys are great. You must want some prizes. Okay, well, I'm not going to stand in your way of getting some excellent raffle prizes. I'm going to be very quick with my remarks. Obviously, we have come to the end of a very, very busy 2 days. Lots of conference agenda items, great topics, great speakers. Hopefully, you've all had opportunities to network and meet new people at different airports or within your consulting groups. I think that would be great. This is a wonderful conference for networking. I do want to give you guys some information on tomorrow's events if you are planning on going on the airport tour or on the AMARG tour. Both happen at 10 o'clock. If you're going on AMARG, you're going to be with Chris Boswick. Stand up, Chris. No, really, stand up. And he's going to probably be driving one vehicle because we only had a few people interested in the AMARG tour or that got the clearance to go on the AMARG tour. Those of you that are going on the airport tour, Vicki Matthews over there, she will be your cruise director. We will have a big bus, and I'm thinking it'll be over here or where it's supposed to be. Okay, so Vicki will be your guide. If those of you are driving down to the airport and not wanting to go on the bus, Vicki will meet you where? Center Gallery. Okay, for those of you that didn't hear her hollering, Center Gallery, Executive Conference Room, ticket lobby level, kind of next to Delta Airlines. I'm sure if you get lost, somebody can point you in the direction, so we're happy to have you join the tour if that's how you decide to get to the airport. For those of you who want to be on the bus, get on the bus, 10 o'clock outside of the ballroom. I want to also say one more thing, and that is a big, big thank you to our sponsors. We had a lot of people listed, a lot of companies came to, it's been running the whole time, which is wonderful. Can't say enough about the sponsorship. It's been outstanding. And, the attendance, everything has been wonderful. And we couldn't do it without all of the sponsors. And I really, really want to say thank you from the conference committee and your TAA team. With that, I am going to turn this over to Miss Gladys, because that's why you're here.
I will tell people, if you want them to show up, just bring me along. So that doesn't always happen that way. Depends on what's going on. With that, I've got 4 prizes, a couple of $50, and then we're going to lead into the TV, which we have everything to package it for, and then we've got the Apple Watch, which was donated by Delasoft, one of our new exhibitors. So with that, I thought I saw Jonathan Hudson, our president, but he might have stepped out. Is Jonathan out there? Just so I can get him up here. He hates being up here, so I figured might as well. Oh, that was a good one. You better watch out. I almost turned into a ninja. You're about to have one less guy. I'm just kidding. Cardio, you ready? No, I'm just kidding. Yep, here you go. $50 goes to Brian from CNS Companies. All right, where are you at? Here we go. First one. And you get a nice little centerpiece there for him. Huh? Oh, no, they like. We have to give it together. I would like to break it up, but I can't. You come back here. You get them together. We get them together. We do 4. I know we want to give away more, but we got to give them together. These guys, they like just minimal here. We got a $50 Lowe's gift card from SWAAAE along with the plane. We got Carrie from Santa Maria. Hey, the nice thing is we know they're here. All right, you've got a monitor, a TV. You can plug in all your stuff in the backside of it. And so you're going to see Kathy. I don't think she's in the room, but you're going to see her. She also helps. And that one is going to go to David from Livermore. David from Livermore, you got a TV. This is what I always say. If you don't need another TV, somebody around you does need a TV. All right, with that, hold on. So where's my Delasoft guys? There we go. Come up here real quick. Come up. Yeah, I got to do this real quick. Just tell people really quick what you do. I know we got 1 minute here, but let them know what you do real quick because you're one of our new exhibitors, and I appreciate what you did because this is what people were excited as well. So there you go. Tell them who you are.
Delasoft, we're located in Delaware. We mostly do permitting softwares, mostly with the DOT, utility permits, entrance permits. We're new in the airport management. We're trying to work with the Grand Canyon National Airport with a revenue management system. We met a lot of new people here and learned a lot of new information. And just want to say thank you for your hospitality, and I look forward to meeting a lot of you in the next conference.
Very nice. Thank you. And just so you know, if you do decide to go to Delasoft, the tech support, he's right here. He's real. He's located where he said he is. With that said, not like that. I got to watch myself. Oh, no, I was kidding. Okay, here we go. So you get to pull it for me. Just so you know, whoever you're going to pull is going to be your best friend. Can't put it on eBay. If I find you on eBay, which I got ops who loves eBay. My ops guys, I don't know, some of you ops guys in here, I got to make sure they do a lot because they like eBay. Here we go. Oh, here we go.
Ryan W. Toner from Dibble Engineering.
Shut up. Of course. Okay, so you have to know this. You pick the guy who's always second place in the arm wrestling contest. Just so everybody knows, step aside. You see that? Step aside. Do you need me to carry your Apple Watch for you? I know your arm's still broken. Come on, what? Don't get embarrassed. Don't get embarrassed. I've been lifting weights. Just so you know, this is the arm wrestling champion knot, and I'm very proud of you. Oh.
It's time for Gladys to turn off the mic.
Okay, there we go. All right, with that, just so everybody knows, we had a great conference. Conference committee, can you please stand up one more time? Those who helped with the conference, let's give them a round of applause. And also to the Tucson Airport Authority, we appreciate you. We know that you've got a lot going on, and so thank you guys for being so wonderful with great attitudes. And for everybody else, we're always free of charge. The entertainment is, especially this guy. With that said, thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you guys in Monterey. And then remember Reno, 19th through the 22nd. And tonight, we've got the banquet down here, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock first, in the foyer. Yep, reception, and then we're going to come into here for a great banquet all together, so just get ready. Anything else, Ms. Maples?
Yes, thank you. The corporate committee meeting will begin momentarily in this room.
There you go. Nope,
That's it. It's a wrap.
No worries.
It's okay. You just had to put the fear in her.